welcome to another episode of the Jason and Bart Show. I am really good at this now. I don't know what it is. Maybe because I edited like 5 shows at once and I've heard our voice over and over and over and over. I think this is just more fun now.
Exponential growth, episode to episode.
Yeah. Jason, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Our topic for today, budgets of a project. More specifically, clients not understanding how much stuff costs. Is that the best way to describe that? I think it is.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to start off. I mean, it's not. I guess I'll start off by saying this: it's not really the client's fault, right? I think,
Right.
you know, chances are the people that we're interfacing with when we're going through the sales process, you know, they're not necessarily the final arbiters or decision makers of budgets or price points or whatever. It's sort of being dictated to them. A lot of times the decision, especially if you're dealing with enterprise clients, the decision has been made in some other room and is handed down to procurement or whoever. And they just say, you know, this is it. We're not going to go over this. And sometimes they give a reason and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's purely bean counting. And sometimes it's to what we were discussing a little earlier before we started the show, Bart, is, you know, they look at it and go, oh, well, we saw someone do something similar for, you know, this price. And so therefore we don't think we should pay more than that price. And, you know, that's a very apples to oranges argument.
Yeah, I'm not right. You know, we're going to go backwards a little bit in the conversation, but I'm not mad at that actually. What I get concerned about a lot of times where, you know, you get few agencies to do a bid and every single bid is so off. And then you have a client just go by price without realizing the total cost of ownership. Right. You know, we've been around the business for a long time. When we pitch or we say the project is $1 million, that comes from just experience, right? It's experience of understanding what it will take. $1 million could be just the beginning, right? When clients go just for the number, it doesn't take in count all the work that has to get done, right? Mm-hmm. They're just looking at the bottom line. They're not looking at the whole kick and caboodle, the whole thing. And that, I think that's where clients will get in trouble because they'll spend a lot more time doing, you know, going through this and then come back to us or have another bid out and going, well, now we have to redo it because it's incorrect. Can you give us a break? That's actually what really pisses me off.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think they're not technologists, right? I mean, they're not developers. That's not what they do. So they have no idea what the effort is around delivering an enterprise grade digital solution, oftentimes. And that's what makes the budget arbitrary. And I know used to put a lot of weight on project budgets when they would come in the door, because, you know, that's part of the math you do to operate your business in terms of, well, if the average lead coming in the door is X and the average close is Y, then I need these many leads to get this conversion rate to close these many projects at this average amount. And that's going to allow us to hit our revenue. But the truth is that what we've learned over many years now is like initial project budget is probably the least important number of the entire process, because it's really about lifetime value more than anything else. So from the agency perspective, the weight that gets put on the initial project budget is usually way overweight from the client standpoint, right? And I feel like from the agency perspective, it should be way underweighted. You should not really take it overly seriously. I think the best thing you can do is you and your team get together, you put together the most value intensive program you can to solve their problem, and don't worry about price. I mean, I know that's easy. I know that sounds like a t-shirt, but the truth is the client who says, if everybody knows it's $1 million project on our side, and the client says, well, I'm not paying more than $500,000 because I saw somebody else do this for $500,000. 9 times out of 10, 90 days into that project, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Also, by the way, the people doing it for half the price very oftentimes take twice as long.
Right.
And part of pitching it is educating. I think that's, Bart, when we talk about this, like going through the sales process, everybody talks about closing and winning. And of course, those things are super important. But for me, it's engagement and education. I think if you can engage and educate a client through your sales process, you have a much higher chance of getting the results of the win that you're looking for.
Right.
And a lot of times they're not educated. They don't understand. So part of it is not just saying, hey, we're going to build you this thing that you don't understand. Part of it is actually pitching how you deliver, not just what you deliver, but how you deliver.
Yeah. And I think, one of the biggest things, like, I think for us is that, this is why one of the biggest reasons why we have our way in, right? We know what the structure is, and we know we can deliver from that, right? We know the delivers, we know the cost. That's what it is, right? Going through the project, like, I keep on going back to old school. Like, I love when it used to be like, oh, just send me how much it's going to cost, without like no conversation. Or I love when they're like, well, we had a agency had a conversation with us for half an hour and they gave us a number. I was like, that number is wrong. That is just wrong. There's no way that number is correct.
Sure. I mean, everybody can go into a room and give you a number, but it's a race to the bottom. If you're just, look, again, obviously we're biased because we're on the agency side, but from the client perspective, in my opinion, I think it's just a race to the bottom. If you're just going based on price and price alone, is price an important component of choosing your vendor partner? Of course it is. Of course, no different for how agencies choose their vendor partners. Of course, price is a major component, but it can't be the only component. Otherwise, you really are just, it's just, you wind up with such diluted solutions as a result. And what winds up happening is you wind up coming back to Sumo, or you wind up going back to a crowd favorite. 90, 180 days later, you've spent the money to get the thing up off the ground. And now you have to start all over again because, agencies are going to walk in there and go, hey, I know you've been working on this with somebody else for 6 months, but we're going back to day 0. We're not starting on day 6 months plus 1 day.
And they all want a discount.
Right.
And they were like, oh, why were you spending money? I'm like, you didn't spend it on us though.
Exactly. So again, I think a lot of it just comes down to education for the clients. And it's a lot like timelines. I feel like timelines, oftentimes, if they're not tied to a specific event, when a client says, oh, this needs to be done by X date, oftentimes the timelines are often arbitrary as well. They've just been kind of come up in a room and they don't know how long stuff takes or how intensive stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, I think when a timeline is based on an event, a launch, like you have to do it, that's fine. Like that's an actual timeline, right? But arbitrary timelines, like, well, we have to get it done by this, but why? Like, why?
Right.
Is there some event going on around that? If there's nothing, then that's not a timeline, right? It's like whatever that is.
It's like, no, the
But if you
CEO just wants it by the end of the
wants
quarter.
it, right? And that's not a timeline, right? But if you have an investor pitch, you have I don't know, a road, whatever that is, right? Whatever the industry you work in happen to be. If there's an actual timeline, there's an actual timeline. But then it's like you go backwards, like, guess what? We can only get quarter of this done for the budget that you have, right?
Yeah.
Cheap, faster, good. Just pick 2 of those. I mean, it goes back to we had a Russian friend do that all the time. So that was really fun with that accent.
Yeah, it's true. You can choose 2 of the 3, but you can't have all 3.
No, it's impossible to have all 3. You're not going to have cheap, fast, or good. And then you have nothing, right?
So we're talking a little bit about misalignment of budgets in the sales phase. What about maintaining project budgets through the actual production phase?
So for us, it's a little different, obviously. We're your retainer services every month.
Right.
The way we tackle a lot of that too is, over the years, we've learned how to talk about it. We actually, every month we look at what's being worked on, how fast we're working. By the time we get into 3, 4, 5, we know the speed. Now we have clients who pile other projects on top of that, but that's a new SOW. That's not, what I mean? Like it becomes that, like we look at from a perspective of, I would say say most of our clients, there's multiple projects going on at the same time. So at some point they're just retaining our services, right? So we get to move around as we need to. Yes, there's an additional fees to that, and we just up our retainers on things to cover what we need to cover. So our stuff doesn't run up, but I've seen chatter here and there, like how that can actually run up. Because if you're doing, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like if you're doing projects on a fixed bid and client doesn't, respond to things, or they respond to things late because they're doing 50,000 other things,
Yep.
like how, that gets really tricky really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Client delay stuff and that's why that's
Client delay
important to
stuff.
get into
And
your
it's not always,
contracts.
and it's not always their fault. They're just
No,
swamped too. You
they're
know what I mean?
waiting. Well, they're also waiting for answers from people who work with them too. Like,
Right.
like they have to herd their own cats a lot of the time, right? So getting back to misaligned budgets in the sales process, you know, are you willing to walk away, or do you
Mhm.
do math at some point and go, well, we wanted it to be X budget because with X budget came Y profit. They want to do Z budget. And if we agree to Z budget, it's still profitable, but it's X minus Y or whatever. And that's going to give us a new profitability. It won't be as high, but it's something. Now, if you have capacity, I'm just talking about if you have capacity and you're an owner and an operator, is something better than nothing?
It depends. Ooh, that depends actually. And that goes for multiple things, right? Do we want the project? Do we want the client? Do we know that client? Those kind of things come up.
Sure.
Does it make sense? Can we twist this client to be a good client eventually from our perspective after we do a discovery and that phase? Could we actually, change it into a better? We had that multiple happen. We actually just presented a contract that we didn't know if we're going to be at the client for a week when we first started with them. It's been 3 years.
Right.
Because we changed the trajectory of and convinced them into like, hey, this is a better way of working. This is what it is. Like we got to that point, right? So can you take a client that doesn't look good on paper at the beginning to become an amazing client and align them to you? Sure. Can the opposite be also true? Absolutely. You take a good client in the beginning and then just unalign themselves at some point for whatever reason. So yeah, do you take that client? I mean, it really depends. In
Yeah,
this
sure.
market, you might have to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the other side of that, right? When you
And I
can be
think
choosy, sure.
it goes both ways, right? I mean, I think there are times where, look, I think there are times where if a client is just so far away from uh, where you need them to be in order to make a proper profit off of a project, then it's a much easier call, obviously. But it goes
Right.
both ways. You can take, again, if you have capacity, right? You
Yep.
can choose to take a little bit as you negotiate through.
Mm-hmm.
You can figure out what sort of that emergency percentage is when you have capacity that you'd be willing to take that on. But it also goes the other way as you're negotiating with clients. And I say that in this way. There are a lot of clients who will say, we have $1 million budget. We can't go a penny over $1 million. And if you present to them a $1.1 million budget, are you telling me that they're going to spend $1 million, so they're going to not do this project now for because of $100,000?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I just don't buy that that's the case. So a lot of times, if we believe it's more expensive and we're within a certain range, or we can get it to be within a certain range, even if it's over their stated budget,
Yeah.
we feel like we can negotiate with them and get them to understand that, what are we really talking about here when it comes down to it, right?
Right. Is
If
it
a
because
project's going to,
if you guys can't from finance, you're not allowed to go over 100 right now, or is it just there's
right,
a
like,
mental
is it
breakdown somewhere, right?
logistics? Because we can work around that, right?
Right.
Exactly. But like, if you're talking about and let's just do round numbers, a 1 year long project and it's $1 million, and you're talking about $100,000, a $1.1 million bid, you're
Yep.
going to the client going, we're talking about $8,000 a month here, guys.
Yep.
And again, depending on who your client is, assuming that they're going to do $1 million budget, they've
Yep.
got money and they're probably a bigger company. And so, you sit there and you break it down for them like that. It's like $8,000 a month. What are we
Yeah.
even talking about at this point?
It's
So
it's
you can play with it kind of both ways.
As a salesperson, or when you're negotiating as not a salesperson, just if you have a small firm, it's just learning those little tricks of like breaking it down to very simple pieces, right? Like, what is that, right? Like, our example is always, we start at $25,000 a month right now as a retainer, but that's because we grew up to this, right? When we were first pitching it, it was 10, 15. At 15 for yearly retainer with us is $300,000 a year. Like at the 15, they're like, oh my God, it's $15,000 a month. But I'm like, but it's only $300,000 a year. You barely get 2 developers for that, where you get a whole team and all the management and all that stuff for the same price. It's just, comparing and putting them into a, not anchor, what do we call it? Sort of a good comparison,
Yeah. Well, you right. And again, this is when I talk about education, you're trying to put them into, you're trying to breed familiarity into what goes into the deliverable, whatever it is that they're asking you to do. Right.
Yep.
Because that's the easiest way to get expectation alignment around the project too, because, that's the other thing. If you think it's $1 million project and you wind up accepting to do it for a lot less than that, I guarantee you your expectations between your team and the client are not going to be aligned the entire way through the actual production process.
Right. Nah, absolutely.
They're going to still expect the $1 million thing. Your team is going to expect to deliver 50% of that, and they're going to wind up having to deliver more than what they're expecting to do. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's always fun.
I mean, look, like obviously money is always this, well, I won't say always, but is usually a sticky point as you go through the process. But I do think, and this is easy to say again, but I do think being willing to walk away, I think every negotiation, the best negotiators are the ones who are always willing to get up from the table and walk away. Right. And I think when you go into these things, again, depending on your situation, don't put so much pressure on yourself to win it. Put pressure on yourself to participate well in it and represent yourself well in it. And that's the best you can really do. It is like dating a little bit, you have to build a bit of trust and credibility before the other person will sort of start to go, will start to listen to you more, because everybody comes to these relationships with preconceived notions. Trust me, you're not the first vendor agency that they've worked with. So that means they've had X's, and with X's comes scar tissue, right? And with all that scar tissue that they're bringing into the room, you as the new person that they may be dating, you've got to also be understanding, right, that they're walking into a room with scar tissue, and maybe they're protecting themselves with their budgets. That's a defense mechanism for them. It's a way they can maintain control because they've had a bad experience in the past. This all goes into the human experience of this thing, where you get away from numbers and requirements and scope, and you really get into who the client is and who you are, and do you align as people, right? And what's their experience been in the past, and how are you going to differentiate from that? And you spend a lot of time talking about that. I think when you get to the budget question, comfort makes people loosen up on budgets more than anything else. If you're credible and they're comfortable with you, going to 1.2 instead of $1 million, like, it's a no-brainer if they're comfortable with you. But it's easy to walk in there and be like, I just know more than you, and you just should know that this is $1 million, and I can't believe you don't know it's $1 million, and I'm going to, but you don't know their story either, right? So you got to spend some time with that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a tricky thing. So,
yeah.
This
is awesome, man. Well, I hope this was helpful for folks doing there. That's right. Well, look, we're all going to be in these rooms, and especially in this particular time, where clients are going to be more risk averse to how they spend their money. Budgets are going to be a big topic of conversation this year. And again, just to reiterate, sorry, but get away from the coldness of the numbers and get into the warmth of the human beings and building the relationship, because that's the best way to sort of thaw that out, and get to the numbers you want and the numbers you need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. All right, Jason, here's another show for us, buddy.
That's it. Another one in the can. Oh, hey, before we go, we're doing this segment, and we missed it last time.
We did.
So we don't have a name yet, because I don't want to rip it off, but because I did this on another podcast, to be fully transparent. But the end of the show, we're gonna do like what we're watching, what we're reading, what we're binging, what we're into, like what's going on, like kind of pop culture kind of stuff. So I'm gonna put you on the spot first because I got to think about mine. What anything you're reading, watching, movies, anything?
Not so weirdly
anything with
enough,
the kid? Any Blues Clues?
no.
I don't know what to watch.
I mean, I'm into. I mean, it's all Disney all the time. Miss Rachel is constantly on in this house. She's amazing, and it's all good. No, I've just been working a lot, so for me, it's rewatching some stuff, and it's always like easy to rewatch stuff. But what I'm excited about, what's interesting, is have you seen the new show on Netflix called Kaleidoscope?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the trailer.
Did you see what the weird premise is?
Yeah, it's very strange.
The way they're doing is everybody that watches it has a different experience.
Oh,
so you can watch each episode in a different way, in a different order, and Netflix chooses for you. So your order is going to be different than mine.
So they're going to personalize it based on their algorithm.
It's all personalized, yeah.
That's smart.
But
that's really
there's
good.
a way to do. You can find online how to actually watch it, and I think they all end on white, whatever that is. But it's different. It's basically everybody has a different order.
Very cool.
And you can watch it out of order.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah. For me, I was gifted one of my Secret Santa gifts. You can't see it. It's called Zero to One. It's a book by Peter Thiel, so I'll be reading that. I'm on a plane the next couple of days, so I'll knock most of that out, I hope, on the plane. And that's very cool. And I'm looking forward to that. That was given to me by one of our developers for Secret Santa. I'm trying to knock off some movies. I haven't watched a lot of movies, like a lot of like the Oscar stuff this year. So I watched a really interesting movie on Netflix called The Pale Blue Eye with Christian Bale.
Okay.
It's like a murder thriller, and it takes place at West Point in like 1830. It's really interesting.
Okay.
It wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be, but the end made it worthwhile. So I will just leave it there. So yeah, checking that out. And
check that out, man.
It was kind of interesting. Edgar Allan Poe is a character in it. It was good.
It's interesting.
It was good. So anyway, wanted to get that segment in. When we have guests on, we'll be getting them involved in this too, because I definitely want to know what people are reading and watching, what they're into, for sure, for the audience and for ourselves. So
yeah, so we have the episodes that are No More Show kind of scheduled. What I think we're gonna do.
Oh yeah, you gotta tell the people when we're dropping.
We're dropping on Tuesdays. Did I say Tuesday at noon?
Eastern.
Eastern. On the on the right coast,
on the ET.
But also when we have guests, they're going to be intertwined. So if you feel like it's out of order, it's not. We just happen to have a guest, and I think that's going to be the idea. We'll have 2 a week or something like that when it comes to episodes, because I feel like that's going to be fun.
Yeah,
and I'm getting better at this editing thing. I can do it really quickly now.
And we got a great lineup of folks who are eager to come talk about their agencies, and how they've run them, their experiences there. So that'll be great. Yeah,
and I'm gonna have to work on my background because I look like I have no arm right now.
You're missing an arm. There you go.
I have to put my green screen up.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank
you
see you
so next week.
much. Yep. See you next week.